Hey everybody, it's Jason Lowe. You can call me J Lowe, and once again we are here on the AI Diatribe podcast. And joining me are a couple of my compatriots, Mr. Chad Muckenfuss and Trevor Burnside, and we're going to talk today about game theory and what that means for companies that are looking to adopt artificial intelligence within their own walls. In other words, what does game theory tell them that they should do? All right, so here we go, guys. Chad, good to see you, my friend.
Thanks for having me back on, Jason. Happy to be
And
here. Hey, Trev.
hey, Trev.
Hey, how's it going? Good to be back.
All right, you guys were actually here in Salt Lake this last week. It was pretty cool. We were able to go to lunch, and I want you to know that I love Doghouse, and I had not been there in so long. And boy, that place is good.
Yes, it is.
It was packed. Apparently, everyone else likes it too.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, let's set the table for what we're going to talk about today. So for the people that are going to be listening to this, we probably ought to introduce the concept of game theory and what that actually means. So let's describe this in the terms of what's called the prisoner's dilemma. So I'm going to make this interactive, and the three of us are going to discuss what that means. So let's say, gentlemen, for the sake of argument, Trevor and Chad, you guys got caught doing something really bad. You got arrested for a crime together. Now, the police have separated you and have offered you both the very same deal. And this is the deal. You ready? If you betray the other person by confessing and testifying against them, and they stay silent, you get off free and they get 10 years in prison. Okay, that's scenario one. Scenario two is if you both stay silent, you each get 1 year prison sentence for a lesser charge. But if you betray each other, in other words, you both talk, you each get 5 years. Interesting, huh? Now, the catch is that you aren't able to communicate while this happens. And so each of you has to have some sort of an idea of what's best for you. And if you think about it, you have a rational incentive to betray each other, because if the other person stays silent, betraying gets you off free. But if the other person betrays you, staying silent gets you the worst sentence. And so, using the rules of logic, both will betray. So, logically, both are going to betray, even though, mutual silence is better for both of them. If they only get 1 year each, the most likely outcome is going to be mutual betrayal because, individual rationality is going to lead to something that's going to be suboptimal for the collective. So, gentlemen, why do you think this matters as it relates to companies that are adopting AI?
Well, first off, just going with the explanation there, snitches get stitches. So you just keep your mouth shut and move on. That's what I learned in my doing time. So, that's a better way to go.
And we learned more about Chad than we knew before. Okay.
But applying it to AI and AI adoption within an organization or competing organizations, I guess, what I see is, there's that wait and see mentality of, let's give it a little bit of time. It's a new technology. Let me see what my competitors are doing. There's the mindset of let's push and get this done now. Let's be the first to the table with it and prove it out, get it active. Let's be the leader in this area. And then there's the whole, nope, I don't want to have anything to do with it. It's not a fit for my business. I don't want it. I don't care if my competitors have it. I look at it from a standpoint of me personally being put in charge of something like that. I would want to drive to be the innovator, but that's just me being in tech and being around tech and doing all that kind of stuff. I'm sure there's a lot of things that you guys can delve into too that would say maybe the wait and see is the better model or a portion of that type of mindset. I don't know. What do you think?
I think if you look at it from what occurred in cloud not too long ago, as far as that race to the cloud, right? Migration to the cloud is a little similar in the sense of we don't necessarily know what we're doing. We don't know how it's going to be optimized. We don't know if we're doing it the right way. But we know that this is the way that things are going. So early adopters of cloud, while clunky and expensive and wasn't architected correctly, there's better ways to do it now, modern cloud architecture that just didn't exist. those companies are refactoring and changing, modernizing, and going through that digital transformation, if you want to call it that. But they're still here and they're still around, and they're much more agile than those that didn't.
You're talking about first movers advantage, or at least something to that effect, right? Because,
Correct.
and I have an interesting analogy I'd like to relate, and then I'd like to throw this out there. You guys tell me if it's a good analogy or a cruddy analogy. But let's say that time is the racetrack, okay? And someone way back, let's say that they start running and they have some good velocity going, and they're running up to when another company is going to start adopting, okay? So the person that's running up to that point of time already has some built-in velocity. They've already got some, some momentum. So if the person that is in the starting block at the same time that this person is running as fast as they can, if the person in the starting block doesn't get to start until that person hits their point in time, they're going to be behind and they may not ever catch up. It's kind of like you need to build the momentum so that when you reach the time that having the AI in place is very valuable, you're ready and you are prepared and you have the infrastructure in place and your data is prepared and you know what you're doing as it relates to working with AI. You may not have had an effective use case in the past, but now when the technology has reached the point where it's going to be very effective, you're ready.
Well, and that's interesting because I think you hit on a couple of things there. I'm going to go back 2 years in discussing AI and talking about it in the marketplace has gone from this is what it can do and a wow factor of hey, this is gonna solve all of your problems to now our talk tracks as all three of us are going out and speaking on this and talking about it is data governance for is a key thing, and making sure the data is clean and usable and everything that you're putting into it is the right data to get the outcome that you want, as opposed to let's rush to market and throw something up there and cross our fingers that it's going to work. Now I think we see the error of our ways in rushing to market with something and taking a step back and saying, hey, we got to make sure data readiness is there. We've got to make sure data governance is there. And then we can start playing around with how it's going to be useful and making sure that the outcome is what we want it to be.
But aren't there some risks? I mean, early adopters, is it possible that they could lose the game if the technology matures differently than everybody expects? I don't think this is going to happen. I think it's not possible. But what if Moore's law and the rate at which this technology is improving somehow plateaus or tails off or just doesn't ever reach its full potential?
I think that's a good point. And there's actually, so if you look at an example, bringing back in game theory into this, an example of game theory not long ago when it comes to Tesla and Elon Musk. Tesla, at least very initially, were very competitor friendly. Early, like with Tesla, when they could have put a lot of patents on a lot of things that they were developing, were actually very competitor friendly, opened those patents to anybody, and kind of took on that mantra of, a rising tide raises all ships, right? They wanted actually to increase the EV market or increase the buyers. Now that the risk there is, hey, what if we make all of our things open? We don't have patents and, another competitor comes and makes something better than ours. I think that's just the faith that they had in their technology and on their product that the market could be bigger, but they would still be a leader in that. So there's certainly a risk there, I think.
And we've seen that happen in the tech space. I mean, if you look at going back cellular phones pre-iPhone, I mean, I had a Palm Treo. Palm failed miserably. I loved that phone when it came out, but it failed. And then you look at BlackBerry. All of us on this call had Blackberries, and probably a lot of the people listening to this had Blackberries, loved it. But again, it was surpassed. Like, who's going to want just a flat screen and touch that and no buttons for typing or anything? And guess what? All of that stuff, they were first to market. They were driving market innovation, and then they fell flat on their face. And I think we can see that over and over again. And I think that's always going to be a part of new technology as it comes to the table. And I think it's going to be a big part of AI. I mean, half of the companies that we talk to now have some kind of AI. Whether they do or they don't, they're labeling themselves as AI to try and get that foot in the door to earn business.
As an end user of the technology, I'm going to take what you just said, Chad, and circle this back to the original point, which is BlackBerry may not be around, but the people that got used to working with Blackberries and gained efficiency from using those types of devices were a lot more comfortable when the next devices came out because they already had the experience with the concept of using that type of a device. Whereas someone that was new to it, they were still experiencing the stumbling blocks of trying to get used to that paradigm. And people with Blackberries, they just a new device, throw the Blackberry over their shoulder, grab the iPhone, and they're on their way.
That's a good point. The case being, right? Hey, people that were doing emails on their phones well before iPhones, right? They were the BlackBerry users. They were increasing efficiency, working remotely, years before the market caught up to them.
So now this is an interesting subject that I think would be fun to discuss. Chad, you mentioned that there are a lot of providers, a lot of vendors out there that are all screaming, we have this AI product and we have that AI product. So now the question is, how many of those are about looking innovative versus being innovative?
My initial response is you have about 25% that is actually innovative. And Trevor and I sat through some meetings this week. The ones that were innovative stood out and stood out very well in the marketplace. And I do think that 25% is a pretty realistic number in the marketplace right now of actual innovative AI companies that have a unique product, are doing something unique in leveraging the technology versus the other ones that is just a marketing term.
So you think that companies are making things and labeling it AI just so that they can appear that they're in the game, basically. Well, the same might be said for end user consumers of AI, right? How many companies are saying that they're adopting this AI technology to make their companies run better just so that they can appear that they're in the game, whether or not they actually have good usable use cases of AI within their wall?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I attended RSA Security Conference this year in San Francisco, and over 400 vendors or something like that, immense amount of activity. Everyone there is talking about AI. Everyone's talking about how they're adding it or how they are an AI first company, all these things, right? All these buzz terms. And I think to your point, absolutely. It's almost as if you're not talking about it, then you can't be included in the conversation. We can't take you realistically. But because I have to include it, and I may not be innovating, it might just be something I'm trying to add so that I can say me too and look like I'm on a bleeding edge when I really could just be trying to catch up.
It's interesting because looking at this from the perspective of companies, the game theory thing says that everybody should be looking to adopt AI as soon as you possibly can. That's just game theory logic, right? Because if another company adopts AI and you don't, and suddenly they have a competitive advantage against you, the efficiencies born of AI are going to be almost insurmountable, at least as far as late adoption is concerned. I found some interesting statistics. I'd like to throw these out and get your guys' thoughts on this. So, 78% of global companies report using AI in at least one business function, at least one. That is a massive increase, 70 or 80% increase over the previous year. But here's the counter statistic. Only 26% of companies, 26%, they have developed the necessary capabilities to move beyond these pilot projects that they're doing and achieve actual measurable, tangible value from AI in the terms of ROI. So there seems to be this gap between adoption and effective implementation. So that's a whole additional conversation to have. Why is that the case?
I think part of it's a barrier to entry on being able to build your own products. I've been working with several clients lately that want to use AWS or Azure products, Azure AI Foundry that came out not too long ago, right? Where you can actually build agentic AI agents to address what you want to do, but you have to have a DevOps practice, you have to have dev engineers, you have to understand the software development lifecycle and be able to implement that.
But does that mean that they identified a good use case to begin with? I mean, that seems to be the problem. To me, you have people that are in such a rush to develop AI applications and to incorporate AI within their walls that they're not actually sitting down strategically and figuring out what's going to be the best thing to do right now first. There's not any long-term strategic road mapping going on as far as AI adoption is concerned?
Yeah, I think again, just to kind of bring this full circle. I mean, what I was seeing this week in sitting in the trainings that Trevor and I were in, and listening to these companies, and then seeing those or similar statistics that you just mentioned, Jason, is the fact that companies are again rushing to check that box. Like, yeah, we've got AI, we've got AI. We're one of those companies. We're leading the market in this. The reality is, again, more than 50% of those projects fail. And what we're seeing is the company coming behind that and going, well, what happened? Why did it fail? And also the cost of that project right now, to Trevor's point, from DevOps to, all of that goes into it, is well into six figures, even on a basic level, to get something built that's going to potentially or maybe have some kind of ROI in the future. So it's a big uplift, I think, for a lot of companies right now. And I think that the marketplace is going to drive that cost down over the next year or two substantially as we begin to leverage and understand. And I'm sure this is stuff for a later podcast, but how, the coding can work. AI can do the coding for you. AI can do and build itself essentially to utilize, and you can just drop it into where you want it to be. And again, going back to my original point, as long as, the data is clean, as long as there's data governance there, you can have it build itself and do that very well, I think, in the very near future. And the cost factor will drop. And I think we'll see more and more implementation of it.
Well, you're talking about recursively improving AI, where AI is improving itself. And we're
Yes.
actually getting pretty close to that. I mean,
Yep.
not a lot of people know that Google has an AI tool that is designing its own AI chips. And it's designing them more efficiently than their human designers are actually able to do. So much so that in the last 2 or 3 models, they've actually measured the efficiency gains between the computer generated model and the human generated model. And that is actually starting to increase at an exponential rate. But there is definitely value to be had. Okay, so this is another interesting thing. So in the United Kingdom, there was a study where they involved about 10,000 SMEs. And they found, this is what the study said, that AI adoption is expected to boost productivity by 27% all the way up to 133%, with applications ranging anywhere from automating staff scheduling to reducing waste. It seems that the ROI is there. It just needs to be discovered what the best way is to implement AI. And that's where things are falling short, because people are just trying to throw spaghetti on the wall and seeing what sticks. And every time you throw spaghetti, it's costing money. You have to be much more targeted about this resource use of implementing AI.
I think, back to that wait and see approach you talked about, Chad, there's products now this year that didn't exist this time last year in AI, right? So if I'm trying to build an AI strategy, I could say, well, what's going to exist a year from now that we don't even know about, right? That we can't conceptualize. Do I wait one more year and get maybe more out of my, bang for a buck or whatever with a tool that's going to exist that we don't have today? I think, the argument should be have a strategy at the very least, of a plan and a strategy, and whether the tooling comes now or later, finding what that ROI and what that efficiency is a now game. The tooling may be something that it doesn't exist, but having a strategy, I don't think there's a time to waste.
Yeah, it's the old phrase of paralysis by analysis. Like, you can sit there forever and look at, well, maybe next year it'll be better. Maybe next year it'll be better. I don't know if we're ready yet to implement it because who knows what's around the corner, and it never happens. And then, yeah, exactly to your point. Like, okay, well, no, you didn't spend any money on it. No, you didn't do any of that stuff, but you're not reaping any of the benefits of it. And now all your competition has bypassed you. So what did you accomplish? Nothing.
Well, do you know what? There's an interest. I just thought of another analogy that would be good to bring up. Athletes train. They do push-ups, they do sit-ups, they run sprints, they practice their technique, they do all this stuff before they get in the game. They're doing all of these things to prepare. AI is something that you're going to need to prepare for. There's preparation from a data perspective. There's preparation from a infrastructure perspective. There's preparation from a cultural perspective and an education perspective. There's all of these things that are necessary to do before you even start trying to build your first AI use case and unleash it upon the world, all of these things could be worked on. Just like an athlete, the person that just steps on the tennis court for the first time, they're going to get killed by John McEnroe or Pete Sampras or
You're
whoever.
dating yourself with your tennis
Yes,
players, but
I
that's okay.
most definitely am. Roger Federer would be very disappointed in me right now.
Yes.
But the point being is you've got to practice. And the way that you do that, or at least prepare, do the sit-ups, do the push-ups, get the data ready, take a look at the use cases and strategize. What are some of those preparatory steps that we need to do to prepare for when the technology is ready?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And to your point, Chad, that you mentioned earlier, and data governance, data classification, data labeling, all these things that you should be doing anyway, right?
Yes.
That a lot of organizations have been putting off or not including it as part of their compliance or otherwise. These are foundational things that you have to do and have in place before you even start that real steps into developing AI efficiencies in an organization. We are seeing a lot more organizations asking for those tools, because those have been out for forever.
It's interesting. There are a lot of companies that look like they have their head in the sand, that are like a little scared of it. But you know what's funny is that, it's even from a small business perspective all the way up, things are starting to happen. I can cite this study later if somebody wants it, reach out. But 98% of small businesses are utilizing AI-enabled tools somewhere, with 40% specifically employing generative AI applications like chatbots and image creation. And 91%, notably, of these small businesses truly believe AI is going to be instrumental in driving their future growth. So, the whole prisoner's dilemma, people are already implementing AI. Even small businesses are implementing AI. 75% of small businesses are actively experimenting with AI technologies right now. And if you go among growing businesses that are moving into the mid-market space, that rises to 83%.
There's another dilemma in game theory. I think they call it like stag hunter or something like that, where essentially two hunters going after one large game like a stag or a deer is, more cooperation equals more reward. Or the opposite is, hey, they can individually do, hunt their own game and they get small game like a rabbit or a pheasant or things like that, right? Less cooperation, lower reward though. Part of that is, hey, how much cooperation do I want to do? It's going to take more time, more effort. Or do I do it myself, get maybe a lower ROI or a lower reward on that fact, but I don't have to cooperate with anything. I can go as fast or as slow as I want to go. I think that's definitely applicable in the AI realm when you're looking at size of organizations, what they can do themselves, what they can't do themselves. Do they have a DevOps team? Do they not? Can I work with someone else that get me farther than if I could go myself? So I think all these questions are relevant as far as organizations looking to adopt.
Well, we already know that a lot of organizations don't have the capabilities or the horsepower or the personnel to be even having these conversations, let alone trying to implement things themselves. We're in a place right now where, quite frankly, external consulting is going to really help a lot of companies along in this space. All right, so let me ask an interesting question. If we were having some sort of a conversation with business leaders right now, knowing what we know about AI, knowing about the use cases, knowing about the future and what's coming, what do you think are the one or two things we should be telling them to do right now to prepare, even if they're not ready to adopt AI right now?
If you have any inclination to move towards AI, you got to make sure that you're ready for it. You have to do some preparation with your data, with any of the information that you could potentially touch with AI or leverage with AI. You have to make sure that that's ready, that there's governance around it, that all of those boxes in preparation are checked. Otherwise, you're going to spend a ton of money and time doing that on the back end. So start to do it now while you're trying to look at what's out there, while you're trying to make that decision of, do I pull the trigger now? Do I wait another 6 months or a year to see what else comes out? Start doing the basics to get everything ready, because you're going to have to do it one way or the other.
And I think there's immediate ROI on some of those initiatives, right? Data classification. Like now I've got applications that I know are critical, or people have access to HR data and they shouldn't. Right now I can block that off right now. Like there's immediate benefits to some of those things.
It's interesting. There's another analogy that I got from product management, and this is I'm speaking in a lot of analogies today. Check me out, Analogy King. But this one I think is rather interesting. And expectant mothers, please forgive me for using this analogy. But in product management, there was always the preparatory steps or the precursors or the dependencies that needed to be done first before you could do the later steps that were going to get you closer to launching the product. And I think we all can agree that AI is kind of following that same paradigm. And the analogy that we used was you can't grow a baby by having 9 mothers spend 1 month trying to grow a baby and then 1 month later you have a baby. You have to spend the entire 9 months to develop that from front to back. In other words, there is just a sequence of events that has to be followed, and that's going to take a set amount of time. And if you get to the point where all of a sudden you really want to have that baby, you can't delegate, you can't split that up. You just have to follow that successive list of dependencies and preparatory steps in order to make things work. And I think a lot of businesses right now, they're not seeing that. They have their head in the sand thinking, you know what, when AI becomes more capable, sure, we'll get around to implementing things and we'll get around to doing things. But they're not looking to see what it is they have to do to prepare right away.
It comes back to a question of data, right? What's our data worth? How proprietary is it to what I do in my business and my clients and what I've calculated? No one else has the data that I have. So it's up to me to take those steps, and I can't delegate that off. There might be tools that I could start to apply, but that data itself is inherently mine, and its readiness and where it lives, how it's protected. The organizations that know the value of their data are the ones that are making moves right now.
Anything to add, Chad?
No, I think, it just goes back to the basics. While these decisions are happening, work on the basics, get the basics aligned. It's going to help you as a business owner anyway, understand what you have, to Trevor's point, who has access to what in the network and all of that. So it's going to be a help regardless.
All right. Well, I think we've come to some pretty decent conclusions, if you want to call them that. Based on game theory, people need to start looking at ways to adopt AI or at least prepare for it. And doing so is not only good from a game theory perspective, but it's also good from a preparatory perspective, so that when things are ready to really have a massive effect, you've got things lined up so you're able to take advantage of that. In other words, you've done the training before you actually stepped on that tennis court. All right. I think that this has been a really good and healthy discussion. I would say to those that are listening to this discussion, we're going to have more. We're going to change our format a little bit. We're going to start incorporating some guests that'll be on here for us. We're also going to start covering some headlines on a regular basis, some of the things that have happened in artificial intelligence and the impact that those are going to have on business. We're going to keep finding some good subjects for us to discuss. There is so much. We haven't even started to dive into things like the socioeconomic impact of AI and what it's going to do to jobs and what it's going to do to the economy. I mean, goodness gracious, there's much to be talked about there. So Chad, Trev, thanks for joining today. For those of you that are listening, make sure that you do all the things, push all the buttons, do all the liking, do all the subscribing, do all the following. This podcast is on all of the major places: YouTube, Amazon, Apple, and Spotify, of course. And do please like and subscribe and recommend us to your friends and family so that we can make this thing a little bit bigger. All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. This has been the AI Diatribe podcast, and we will talk to you next time. And cut!